The Politicrat is brought to you by the great people at Anchor. Anchor is such a great place to go if you want to get started in podcasting, and it's easy and it's free. Anchor, marvelous stuff, marvelous. And I'm so grateful to the folks at Anchor for getting me going with The Politicrat. If you want to get going and be heard on Apple, on Spotify, and everywhere podcasts can be, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to The Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Saturday, May the 30th, 2020. I'm going to play a series of audio pieces from the last 24 hours. In fact, all of these took place on Friday night, just last night, here in the United States. You may hear foul language during the course of them, just to let you know, in case you may have people listening who object, of course, or who are very young, or who are people who just don't like to hear foul language. But these pieces of audio are played to make a point, which will be the subject. I think you will be able to guess what the subject is of this edition of The Politicrat.
Right now, give us a second, guys. We can move back to where you'd like. We can move back to where you'd like here. We are live on the air at the moment. This is the four of us. We are one team. Just put us back where you want us. We are getting out of your way, so just let us know. Wherever you'd want us, we will go. We are just getting out of your way when you're advancing through the intersection. So just let us know, and we got you. And this is a scene here playing out in Minneapolis. This is part of the advanced police presence that we saw come over the course of really minutes when the local police showed up at the fire department, or with the fire department, I should say, on that building we showed you that was burning. This is among the State Patrol unit that was advancing up the street, saying and scattering the protesters at that point for people to clear the area. And so we walked away. I'm sorry?
You're under arrest.
Okay. Do you mind telling me why I'm under arrest, sir? Why am I under arrest, sir?
Officer's with CNN and he's on the air right now.
Okay.
You are arresting him live on CNN. We told you before that we are with CNN.
If you're just tuning in, you are watching our correspondent, Omar Jimenez, being arrested by state police in Minnesota. We're not sure why our correspondent is being arrested.
Hang on one second, Allison. Let's listen into what these officers are saying. That is an American television reporter, Omar Jimenez, being led away by police officers. He clearly identified himself as a reporter. He was respectfully explaining to the state police that our CNN team was there and moving away as they would request. And then for some reason, he was just taken in to police custody live on television. I'm sorry, I did not mean to interrupt you, Allison. I just wanted to listen to see if we could hear more from the officers, the state police, as this is going on.
Yeah. We're trying to see what's going to happen, John, obviously, to the rest.
How about that, guys? We were just out here reporting the closure of the streets. They just, Omar was just arrested. I believe they're about to we're all about to be arrested. That's our producer.
Our CNN producer is
I'm
being...
probably going to be taken in a minute.
Our CNN camera crew and our producer are being arrested right now on live television in handcuffs.
I've never seen anything like this.
Why, guys, what is...
Allison.
Why are you arresting us? We're just passing along the message, your message. I'm done. We're just out here doing our job as well as you all.
We can do that.
Can you tell me what are...
Are you under arrest?
Okay. I'm being arrested now.
Yeah.
Can I put the camera down?
If you're just tuning in, this is our camera crew, our CNN camera crew, being arrested by the Minneapolis State Police. We believe the camera is now on the ground because our cameraman has been handcuffed. Our correspondent, Omar Jimenez, was also led away in handcuffs, as was his producer. They were standing where they were told to stand previously by police. They were out of the way. We don't know why they're being arrested. They're not being given any explanation, as far as we can hear, for why they're being arrested. We don't know why they're being handcuffed and led away. They are allowed to be reporting on the unrest that's happening right now, but for some reason, the state police have decided that they need to be under arrest.
And just to be clear, Allison, having been in the middle of protests like this, I've never seen anything like this. I have never seen anything like this. The camera is being walked away now. I don't know if this camera is still in the hands of our photojournalist or whether the police officer, this is the police carrying our camera right now, frankly not aware that it's still rolling. We have been listening in, and our team there has not been given any explanation for why they have been taken into custody. And I just want to be clear, if you were watching what Omar was saying and listening to his reporting, he was explaining what had happened over the last few hours and how law enforcement was arriving on the scene and how they had dispersed the crowds largely and how for the first time there was order in the scene. Nevertheless, taken into custody, our camera now on the ground, still rolling, still capturing these live images. We're going to keep on listening to this camera. Josh Campbell, who I believe is not yet under arrest. Hang on one second. All right. The police are now saying they're being arrested because they were told to move and didn't. Now, we were on the air the whole time. Lionel, our photographer, who still has communications with us, told us they had been arrested because they were told to move and didn't. If you were watching, you can see our team was very respectful to the law enforcement presence as it moved through the area.
That was Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is Los Angeles, California. Niecy Nash, the actor and comedian, speaking to Brooke Baldwin yesterday on CNN.
I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm brokenhearted, and more importantly, I'm afraid. You know, my son left my house the other day. He was stopped by the police. He came back and said, "Mama, I did a rolling stop through a stop sign." But he said, so I know I was wrong. But when they pulled me over, it was two cops and one came and tapped on the window with his taser. And I was like, whoa. They asked for my license and registration. I gave it to them, insurance, the whole nine. And while they were running his ID and all of that, one of them said, "How did you afford this car?" his license came back clean and everything was good, the guy with the taser who never put it out said to my son, "Today is your lucky day." And I said, "Why are you lucky today?" And I said, "Why are you lucky if you're a law-abiding citizen? Why are you lucky if there wasn't a reason for them to handle you in an inappropriate way?" I was livid. But the conversation I have to have with my son is, even if you are right, you have to comply in order that you make it back to me alive. Now, that's what I had been telling him. And now we look at George Floyd, who did comply, who was already handcuffed, who was already laying on the ground, and still didn't make it back to his family. So now what do I tell him?
So now what do I tell my son? Is what Niecy Nash was saying there to Brooke Baldwin. Next, from Seattle, Washington. Again, this was last night.
Hey, I need bodies! Back up! Everybody back up! Hands up! Back up behind me. Nope. Behind me. I got you. Behind me. Stop. Get the fuck off! Come on! Hey! What am I doing? I'm not doing anything. Hey, that's abuse! Officer, what's your name?
Back up! Everybody back up!
Grab your man, right? That's abuse! He's not doing shit! Hey! This is your chance! Stop! Grab your man! This is your chance! Hold the line! Line! Hold the line! Hey! Grab your man! Hold the line! This is... Hey, guys! I need 3 right here. Do not let us get corralled here. Hold the line! What is he doing? Hey! This is your chance! Hey! Sir! This is your chance! Do you want another George Floyd? Do you want the city to burn? Stop. Hold the line. What's his name? We got a name. I got his fucking wall. Good.
This is Louisville, Kentucky, last night.
The effect of the tear gas.
So it seems like that people were very prepared.
Right now, we're behind the line.
Okay.
Okay, well, you keep going and go where you gotta go, and that's fine with us.
Okay.
We got plenty of time here.
Are you okay?
I'm getting shot. I'm getting...
Katie, are you okay?
Rubber bullets. It's okay. It's those pepper bullets. Bullets.
Who are they aiming that at?
Not shooting at the photographer.
At us, like directly at us.
Why are they doing that?
He's shooting at our crew.
I don't know.
Do they not know that obviously they see the camera?
Right.
I think you know well what today's episode is going to be about when I return. Welcome back. So you heard a series of pieces of audio that illustrated in just one really 12-hour period the amount of police violence and brutality and cruelty had been exercised against both members of the press and ordinary civilians here inside the United States of America, here in 2020. The first clip, Omar Jimenez, who is a CNN reporter, as you heard, he was arrested live on CNN yesterday morning in Minneapolis, as was all of his camera crew, all 3 or 4 of them, camera crew and producer, on-site producer, all arrested on air, live. And for no reason, as you heard the voices of Alison Camerata and John Berman, who interrupted, may I add, as you heard, interrupted his colleague Alison Camerata. You heard the excuse from the police, who are state troopers, by the way. They weren't Minnesota Police Department. They were Minnesota State Patrol, state troopers. They should be on highways patrolling them. But instead, they were brought to do the most unreasonable and racist thing, which is to arrest a black reporter and his crew, who are mostly Latinx or Latino. While just a block away, you may have remembered hearing the name Josh Campbell, who was also a CNN reporter and a white CNN reporter, who was accosted by the very same state patrol in Minneapolis, the same state patrol, Minnesota State Patrol, just a block away in Minneapolis, a block away from where Omar Jimenez was. And they treated him with respect. They treated him with courtesy. And he was allowed to stay exactly where he was. You had Seattle, where you heard, right there with your own ears, the chaos, the police, and as you heard voices reacting to police, throwing down, and you didn't see it, obviously, but you heard, he's doing nothing, he's doing nothing, he's doing nothing. What was happening, of course, since you couldn't see it, I can tell you, what was happening is that the police were pummeling, 3 cops were pummeling a guy on the ground. I couldn't tell, I think he was probably white or he was Latino. And they were pummeling him on the ground. Then there was another person that they threw to the ground who was just standing where he was. And the police just body slammed him to the ground. This was in Seattle, Washington last night. That other clip that you heard, Niecy Nash, as I've just mentioned, speaking to Brooke Baldwin on CNN yesterday, talking about her son, Niecy Nash, for those of you who do not know, is an actor and comedian. And she is in the series Reno 911. I believe that's the name of it. And she has done numerous films. She was in, one of the things I can most recently remember her in was Ava DuVernay's When They See Us from 2019, about the exonerated 5 in Central Park. Niecy Nash plays, I believe, the mother of one of the young boys who were wrongly convicted and were swept up by police. That's the only reason why they got into any trouble. They just happened to be walking by in the park, and they were swept up by police, who then interrogated them for many days, 3 days, 2 days, no food, no water, nothing, with parents not present. Niecy Nash is an African American, and she was talking to Brooke Baldwin about her son, who just recently actually down in Los Angeles, where Niecy Nash is, where she lives, her son was driving, and you heard it. She talked about him going through and doing a rolling stop, and everybody in California here, we all do it. Her son is an African American male, and these cops, now she didn't mention the race of the cops, but the two cops had accosted him in a very threatening way, telling him, "You're lucky, it's your lucky day." And he didn't do anything wrong. There was nothing illegal. I mean, a rolling stop, he admitted he was wrong. He went a little bit too far, or he was slightly over the requirement or whatever. And the police behaved in the most threatening and menacing way towards him, in the most intimidating fashion. That other clip that you heard was, again, a case of the media being part of the story. It was on live television in Louisville, Kentucky, last night. The reporter that you heard screaming, yelling, had been hit by pepper bullets or rubber bullets. Caitlin Rust is the name of the reporter, who was fired upon, literally fired upon, as you heard, by Louisville police. And when you look at the video, the police officer is literally pointing his weapon at the camera. In other words, he's pointing it directly at us. One clip I didn't play was from Thursday in Minneapolis. Crowd standing there during the afternoon. A procession of police vehicles are going through. Crowd standing there minding their own business, not being unruly. And all of a sudden, one of the police cars in this convoy of police cars, I think it might have been the last police car in the convoy, just sprayed mace all over the crowd that was standing there, minding its own business, standing there watching the cars, the procession of police cars. All of a sudden, there was mace. They sprayed, out of that car was being sprayed mace all over the people just standing there. Minneapolis, Minnesota. We have a police state in this country. That's the point of this episode, and that is not news to many of us who have been murdered by the police for many decades and centuries. George Floyd's name has been invoked, and rightly so. George Floyd did nothing, and he was executed on Monday of this week. And that never had to happen. Police have exceeded their power. They've gone way beyond the pale. And they have for many years, many decades and centuries here in the United States. But that series of audio clips that I played you, literally over a 12-hour period or so, from Friday, May the 29th, 2020, are all you need to know when it comes to the reality that the police in this country are way, way out of control. They have become a totalitarian paramilitary outfit. And they've become a fascist outfit. We saw the police behave like this many, many times and many, many years in the past. The system of policing in the United States is modeled directly from the slave patrols, the enslavement patrols in the United States, which is where the police came from. And I've explained this before. This need to control and enforce and keep people in line. Well, that came from the enslavement patrols, series of white men roving around trying to track down black people who escaped or may have escaped enslavement and bondage. And they would beat or kill these escaped black people. And if they beat them, they would make sure that they were returned to the white enslaving family that held them. This was what would happen. That's where the police came from in the United States. It was birthed out of violence, just like the country was birthed out of violence. From the Boston Tea Party in 1773 and that long battle. And people are upset at people who are fighting back now. I can understand the violence. It doesn't mean I support it. I do not support violence. The reality is when you have a country that was born in violence, then that is its mother, its father. And when you have violent parents, the chances of you being violent are very high indeed. And so the last 244 years, as we come up to that 244-year anniversary of the founding of what is called the United States of America, is replete with violence. And it is replete with violent police. And it is a system where those violent police are able to operate and operate with impunity. A system that upholds police doing these violent things. It doesn't matter if the police are white, black, or anything else. It doesn't matter if the police chief is black or not. What matters is that the system is in place where police are able to continue to do what they do, and the justice system allows them to get away with murder. Derek Chauvin was arrested yesterday, and he was only charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. The autopsy report was released by, I guess, the state coroner, and it claimed that George Floyd died pursuant to hypertension, heart disease, and numerous other ailments, but did not list asphyxiation as his cause of death. And the whole world knows that it wasn't heart disease that killed George Floyd. It was Derek Chauvin crushing his knee into George Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes, while George Floyd was handcuffed on the ground, while 2 other officers were also holding him down with their knees in his back and at the back of his legs, near the back of him. And a fourth officer was standing, watching like a centurion, protecting these cops as they crushed the life, executing George Floyd. There are two books right now that I think are required reading. One of them is a book that is roughly 100 or so pages, if that. The other one is a book that is a bit longer. I still think that both of those books, for those of you who are readers, for those of you who are not readers, are required reading right now. The longer book is called They Thought They Were Free. They thought they were free, F-R-E-E. They thought as in thinking. They were free. It is by Milton Mayer, M-A-I-L-T-O-N, last name M-A-Y-E-R. Very important book. It deals with the Germans from 1933 to 1945. It's a really important book. And as far as I'm concerned, that book is mirroring and is foretelling exactly what we're seeing now in the United States of America, given who is in the White House, given his tweets about looters getting shot, using this very fascist and racist dogma from a racist police chief in Miami in the past, in Liberty City, back in the 1967 or 68. Regurgitating that Nixonian law and order strategy that Nixon used to win the White House. And I'm sure that's what Donald Trump is doing. In fact, he's doing that right now. He is using and politicizing everything that happens. He's politicized this coronavirus pandemic that he did not do anything about. We're now over 105,000, if not double that. A number of people have died in this country because Donald Trump did nothing. And he's doing it now with the uprising. All over this country, people are angry and have had enough. And what we are seeing from the police is fascism, is totalitarianism. That book that I just mentioned to you from Milton Mayer is a very important book. And there's a chapter in there that really does address some of the things that are happening right now. It's literally foretelling what we're seeing now. And you know what happened in Germany during those years, 1933 through 45. You know what happened around the world during that time. The second book, the book that should take you maybe all of an hour and a half to read, if that. If you are a speed reader, it might take you barely an hour. Is a book that is about 100 pages long or so. It's called On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. It is by Timothy Snyder. Timothy Snyder is a professor and he is an expert in Middle Europe and Eastern Europe. He has appeared on in a number of places, including Rachel Maddow's show on MSNBC. You can certainly do searches to try to find some of the things that he has said on her show. And you can also find him in Michael Moore's documentary Fahrenheit 11/9, which was released in 2018. This book is very important as well. On Tyranny. Tyranny spelled T-Y-R-A-N-N-Y. Tyranny. On Tyranny is the name of the book. The subtitle, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. And it's by Timothy Snyder. S-N-Y-D-E-R. Snyder is his last name. Timothy Snyder. Page 42 of this book. I'm going to just read this to you. Chapter 6. Be wary of paramilitaries. When the men with guns, who have always claimed to be against the system, start wearing uniforms and marching with torches and pictures of a leader, the end is nigh. When the pro-leader paramilitary and the official police and military intermingle, the end has come. Let that sink in for just a few moments. Continuing on, page 43. Most governments, most of the time, seek to monopolize violence. If only the government can legitimately use force, and this use is constrained by law, then the forms of politics that we take for granted become possible. It is impossible to carry out democratic elections, try cases at court, design and enforce laws, or indeed manage any of the other quiet business of government when agencies beyond the state also have access to violence. For just this reason, people and parties who wish to undermine democracy and the rule of law create and fund violent organizations that involve themselves in politics. Such groups can take the form of a paramilitary wing of a political party, the personal bodyguard of a particular politician, or apparently spontaneous citizens' initiatives, which usually turn out to have been organized by a party or its leader. I'm going to stop there for just a moment before I read just one other piece of this chapter. When you hear what I just read from Timothy Snyder's book on that page 43 of his book on tyranny, think back to just the last few weeks in this country called the United States of America. Think back to those quote-unquote protests in Michigan at the state capitol, in Lansing. Think back to those predominantly white, in fact, they were all white men and some white women, literally invading the state capitol building. The Democratic governor, Gretchen Whitmer. Think of the death threats. Think of all the death threats against that governor in Michigan. Her name is Gretchen Whitmer. Trump called her that woman. The misogyny that was directed at her. The misogyny that was directed at the governor, Governor Whitmer. Think of the swastikas and the nooses and the Confederate battle flags and the Trump flags and the guns that these white people were carrying in an open carry state. But these guns were allowed in the state capitol where there are politicians doing their business and doing the business of the people of the state of Michigan. Think about that. Think about the fact that they were in that state capitol chanting and shouting and saying racist and misogynist things and threatening the life of Governor Whitmer. And shouting Trump's name. No masks on, shouting, demanding for the state to be opened. These are the armed groups. These are the violent groups. These are the people who were told by Donald Trump to liberate Michigan. That's what Donald Trump tweeted out. In April of this year. Liberate Michigan, he said. And in April and in May, you have these throngs of right-wing, white, racist people with guns, swastikas, nooses, and the police did not arrest a single one of them. They made death threats. They were violent. They got up in police officers' faces. They weren't arrested. They weren't touched. They were armed. They were not killed. They were not executed like George Floyd was. They weren't body slammed to the ground. They weren't shot at with pepper spray or pepper bullets or rubber bullets like the reporter Caitlin Rust in Louisville was last night on the air in Kentucky, live on the news broadcast that she was reporting for. They weren't arrested like Omar Jimenez was live on the air on CNN yesterday morning. I'm going to read this part again from Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny. For just this reason, people and parties who wish to undermine democracy and the rule of law create and fund violent organizations that involve themselves in politics. Such groups can take the form of a paramilitary, that's a paramilitary, P-A-R-A, military wing of a political party, the personal bodyguard of a particular politician, or apparently spontaneous citizens' initiatives, which usually turn out to have been organized by a party or its leader. Well, I can tell you this about those protesters, not just in Michigan, but all across the country. Those protesters were organized by rich families in this country, specifically the DeVos family. Who's the DeVos family? Who does that family include? None other than Betsy DeVos, the Miseducation Secretary. Because I say that, she's not interested in educating anybody. She's interested in putting more money in rich people's pockets. She is a millionaire, by the way, and her family is super rich. The DeVos family, and it's documented, have been funding these open government protests, open the state protests. They've been funding them. They've been the ones behind the ones in, certainly in Michigan, which is where the DeVos family is. And yes, I get it. There are some gun nuts out there who have Facebook pages who may be the faces of these violent, racist, hateful, misogynistic groups of people who shout these vile, misogynistic, and racist death threats at people in government in Michigan. But make no mistake, the people who are behind them, who are funding them, are these rich families, like the DeVos family. Just like the Tea Party was funded by billionaires, the Koch brothers, back when there were Koch brothers, the two leading Koch brothers, the two most prominent ones, Charles and David, funded the Tea Party protests of 10 years ago when President Obama was being demonized and they were saying racist things about him. What we have right now is a merger of corporate and government interests. And we've had this for a number of years in this country. It didn't just start this year in 2020. And when you have a merger of corporate and state interests, corporate and government interests, that is fascism. That is what fascism is. And Donald Trump is a fascist. He has certainly merged and certainly furthered the merger of corporate and state interests. He has violated the emoluments clause. He is trying to, or has tried to get summits held on his Mar-a-Lago estate. That's one of his businesses. That's one of his personal businesses, personal residency. It's a business as well. People can stay there. He has violated the emoluments clause. He has not divested himself of his businesses. Not at all. The tax issue, his taxes still have not been shown to us. There's a Supreme Court case pending right now that was argued just a week or two ago in the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court. It was argued by telephone because of this pandemic that we are still in, by the way, here in the US and around the world. People are under attack by the police in this country. And those audio clips that I showed, that I played to you, and you can see these videos all over the internet, all over Twitter. It's obvious that the police are way past being out of hand. And this book, particularly On Tyranny by Tim Snyder, which I've been reading from here, certainly gives you a glimpse and puts things in historical perspective. Liberate Michigan? Liberate Minnesota? For those of you not keeping track, Minneapolis is in Minnesota. And there have been complaints of white people, particularly white men, specifically white men, looting in Minneapolis, looting in St. Paul, in the state of Minnesota. And there have been some black people that I have seen on television taking things when there is no stimulus check, when there is a pandemic, when they are living on next to nothing. They don't even have any masks, some of these individuals, because the situation is that dire. They are not covering their faces, some of them. They are taking things that they need, as oppressed classes do when situations get desperate. They are not criminals. Now, while they may be taking things that they didn't pay for, and that's certainly an act of criminality, these are not criminal people. And there is an attempt by people in the news media to demonize Chris Cuomo. He's not the only one. Black people, angry black people. Oh, that was Chris Cuomo last night. Meanwhile, you've got these white males all covered up in head to toe, from head to toe, so nobody can see them, smashing windows in Minneapolis, identified as a police officer. This guy, Jacob Peterson. Or is it Jacob Pedersen? St. Paul, Minneapolis Police Department say, oh no, it's not him. But clearly, the photograph of him and the photos that have been all over social media make it very clear that this guy, who was dressed all in black and had an umbrella, who the hell does that? That is not a protester. That is not an activist. That is a provocateur. And for those who do not know, America is replete with them, as is the rest of the world, quite frankly. But in the United States, in particular in the 1960s, you had something called the COINTELPRO program, which was engineered by J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director, who served something like 7 or 8 presidents. Hoover had run the FBI for something like 45 years, if not more. And this COINTELPRO program, the counterintelligence program, was something run deliberately to keep track of and to subvert and infiltrate black political groups and others, but mostly black political groups and organizations who were fighting for justice and fighting to achieve, to get this country to have a semblance of democracy. The FBI would plant people, black and white, but mostly black because they were black organizations, and infiltrate these groups and subvert them and undermine them and try to completely break them up. The FBI spied on Dr. Martin Luther King. The FBI spied on Malcolm X. The FBI spied on the Black Panthers and numerous other political groups. This infiltration continues. And as I referred to in yesterday's episode, there were people who have seen, according to what they are saying, white males looting, committing violent acts. This is not an accident. And all the time that I've seen videos, what I have seen typically is heavily disguised or very clad from head to toe people who are going in and looting things. Here is Oakland, California last night. Listen to this.
Right there. Right there. Smashing on the wall. It's a crew of white boys. It's a crew of them. Look at them. Looting. And they gonna say it's the black people that's looting. It be the white people. Get the fuck out! Get the fuck out! They about to bust in that shit. Stop being stupid. Get the fuck out right now. We not here to loot. We not here to loot. Get the fuck out. Don't go inside that shit. It's not worth it. Whatever you fucking about to do, don't do it. Don't be stupid. It's not fucking worth it. And there it is. All of y'all are gonna fucking die or go to jail. You're supposed to be talking about Black Lives Matter and you trying to loot this fucking place. You fucking hypocrites. You don't give a fuck about Black lives. Y'all don't give a fuck about Black lives. Y'all wanna rob and steal. Y'all wanna fucking rob and steal. And you a fucking white person. Who the fuck cares? We gonna die, you dumbass. That's the point. Some black people gonna die. Y'all some bum-ass motherfucking protesters. Y'all got no morals. All these motherfuckers, I swear to God. There they go. It's all the fucking white people doing this shit. It is not just the black. It is the fucking white people doing this shit, y'all. I'm recording live. These motherfuckers in here looting. These motherfuckers in here. And when this shit blows the fuck up, screaming Black Lives Matter and they want to fucking burn this shit down because it's not black owned. It's the dumbest shit I ever heard.
That was Oakland, California last night. And the woman that you heard was cursing obviously because she was so angry and incensed at what she was watching. And what I could clearly see was that there were many white people there, and all of them were smashing, looting things. Almost every single one of them. You can watch that video. I've posted it on my Twitter handle, which is the Popcorn REEL. Again, my Twitter handle is the Popcorn REEL. I have retweeted that. The Twitter handle is available. You will see it. It's a 2-minute, 20-second video that this lady posted. Or at least it's her recording anyway. I wish I knew what her name was. It may well be Chaz, I don't know. You can find that video, the audio of which you just heard. Why are white males looting? Why are they vandalizing? Why are they stealing? And why isn't the corporate news media reporting on this? Chris Cuomo of CNN. Why isn't this being reported? Of course, that's more a rhetorical question than anything. But it is still a question. And furthermore, what is the agenda of the news media and or the police in having this happen? Well, the answer is given by the woman's voice that you heard just there. Black people are dying in this country. Black people are paying the price. And what I am seeing some white men do is take full advantage of our pain, of our hurt, of our oppression. And some of them, of course, are facilitating that oppression and authoring that oppression. And what I see is they are taking advantage to then do further damage to black people, to then justify putting martial law into place in this country. When you've got Trump saying, oh, well, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Or when the white men are looting in this country, they are not the ones getting shot at. Just like when the white men storm state capitals, they are not being arrested or shot at. They are not getting knees in their neck for 9 minutes. They are not being held down by 3 cops. They are not being handcuffed and held down by 3 cops. One of those cops with a knee in the neck of one of them for 9 minutes. George Floyd had no guns. George Floyd had no flags. George Floyd was minding his own business. And what systemic racism does and what institutions do are exculpate themselves, exculpate their violence. Coroner's office puts out a report, oh, it's not asphyxiation, it's his hypertension and his heart disease that's the problem. This is a getaway car situation. These are getaway drivers for the criminality and brutality and murder and lynching of this man, George Floyd. Make no mistake, they are already doing the getaway car driving for these 4 executing, murdering cops. Third-degree murder? This is what a system does to black people. And then you've got other white men looting in the streets. And then you've got another white man on television, Chris Cuomo, talking about angry black men. Oh, but there were lots of white faces there too. Yes, there were lots of white faces who were marching peacefully. But why won't you talk, Chris, about these white men all around the country who are looting? It's on camera. It's being caught by many people. It's being posted all over social media. Open your eyes. We need a different kind of policing in this country. Like Officer Murphy, the guy who was treating people with a lot of respect in Atlanta. We need that kind of police, and the kind that we used to have, the neighborhood police, which you would see in lots of white neighborhoods and you still do. We need police who live in neighborhoods where the affected and the oppressed are. We need to have that. That should be a requirement in every police precinct in the country. We need to change the mode of policing from force to protection of all. We can't have force for some and protection for some. We need to have protection for all. We need to have a model of policing that embraces and recognizes and respects humanity. We need to have a model of police in this country that is not so paramilitaristic. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush are the chief architects of this heavier, more militaristic policing, with all of this money being budgeted and signed off on to have tanks in Ferguson in 2014, and to have these kinds of vehicles rolling down the streets of this country. You would have thought this was Tiananmen Square. This militaristic policing has got to end in this country. It is criminalizing people who are doing nothing but living their lives. And it is up to everybody who is listening to this podcast, particularly if you are in the US, to demand policing that treats everybody with respect. And since we are just over now, 5 months away from the general election this coming November, we must prepare now to register to vote. That must be done now. Register to vote. You can do so in many different ways online. You can do it through search engine, put the state that you live in this country. And I'm talking about not your mental state, not your physical state. I'm talking about the state you are located in. And put in the Secretary of State or Board of Elections. And you will be able to, should be able to get the relevant website where you can register to vote online. You can do that in pretty much any of the 50 states in this country. You can register to vote online. Certainly you can do so through iwillvote.com. iwillvote.com. I would urge you to do that right now. Do not waste a second. You need to have your voice heard. And with the voter suppression that goes on in this nation, the voter stealing that goes on in this nation, and the sirens that you can hear wailing in the background, you must make sure those sirens may well be signaling that the time for action is now. That is your call to get out there and get active and vote. Obviously, it's a pandemic. What you can do if you are fortunate enough to have online access, to have internet access, to have a computer, is to go to iwillvote.com. You can go to rockthevote.org. Rockthevote.org. Please register to vote now. Do not wait. You can also go to whenweallvote.org. Any of those websites will be helpful. And any of those websites will educate you on voting, the process, what the deadlines are in your state. All of those are very important resources. And take this phone number down as well, just in case you may have some election difficulties. You may have difficulty voting on November 3rd. And don't let anybody tell you that the election is not on November 3rd. It is November 3rd, 2020. So if you get a piece of mail, or you get a phone call, or you get some junk mail saying that the election's on November 4th, pay no attention to it. In fact, I would go further. I would report that. And I'd report it to your local Secretary of State. I would report it to this phone number as well, 866-OUR-VOTE. And in fact, that same phone number is the number I was going to give you for if you have election difficulties, if you have voting trouble, if you run into issues with your voting machine on the 3rd of November. If you are going to go out and vote, most people now, it seems, are going to do vote by mail. And this is why Donald Trump hates vote by mail for everybody. He, on the other hand, doesn't mind it for himself, but for the other hundreds of millions of us who vote, oh, no, you can't do that. Railing against states who are doing this, and they have every right to. And it makes sense that we are in a pandemic to have this happen, meaning to have voting happen. It makes sense to do vote by mail. And with a second wave of coronavirus to come, we're still in the first wave. This hasn't gone away, and it's not going away until we get a vaccine, and even then there will still be coronavirus around. We have a flu vaccine and there's still flu around. So this is going to be something that is going to transform the realities of people, and it already has. Just ask 105,000 families in this country, and let's be honest, probably millions of families around the world. So in the US, it is very important right now to register to vote at those websites I've just given you. And it's very important to check your voter registration, because the Republican Party is going to try its damnedest. It's going to try its hardest to steal your vote from you. And you must make sure that you keep checking, I'd say 2 or 3 times a month, up until the beginning of October, to check your voter registration, because there is already underway in this country. It's not being reported on, but it's already being done in this country, that the Republicans are stealing people's votes. They are literally taking them off voting rolls all over this country. Let that not deter you. Check your voter registration so that if there is something wrong, you can get it fixed. In fact, vote by mail is a really good way to eliminate any of this chicanery by the Republicans. Donald Trump knows well that voting by mail is not fraudulent. If it were fraudulent, why is he voting by mail? And we know that he's a criminal. But if vote by mail was fraudulent, and if he's saying that, oh, people are going to steal your ballot, kids are running around California and steal, he's just a serial liar. We know that he's a gaslighter and a propagandist. So why didn't kids steal his vote by mail when he voted by mail this year in the Florida primary? Did the kids steal his? Come on, people. We have a police state in this country. We have a merger of paramilitary groups. These paramilitary groups are merging with police. Why didn't the police arrest them? We have an infiltration, and we've had this for hundreds of years in this country, of police and citizens, white citizens, doing violent things A really good example of this is Ahmaud Arbery, where an ex-cop who had been with the force and had been investigating in the DA's office down in Georgia for 30 years plus was one of the 3 white men who assassinated, who executed, who lynched Ahmaud Arbery. Many of you have seen the video. This merger is what Timothy Snyder is talking about in his book on tyranny. Again, the other book I recommended in this podcast episode, They Thought They Were Free, by Milton Mayer, Milton, last name Mayer. Thank you for listening to this edition of The Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.